A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So today I wanted to make a video on unlocking the divine history, or unlocking the key to unlocking Quranic history, the Quranic narrative of history. There's actually a verb that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ascribes to himself. There's a fi'l of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called Ja'ilun tajalu. Now, if you understand the usage of this verb in the Quran, this fi'l in the Quran, you will understand divine history. I've told so many people that this is the key to understanding divine history. If you've seen my series with Umar Baloch, I talk about it in that series also. And so basically I'm going to give you 4 usages where this is used in the Quran. There's 4 usages of this that it's used in the Quran. I mean, there's countless usages, there's more than 50 of it, but if you understand these 4, you'll understand divine history, right? Or you'll begin to understand divine history. First off, the most important usage is when Adam al-Islam, Allah says to the angels, I'm going to appoint a Khalifa on the earth. Sometimes that's translated as I'm going to make a Khalifa on the earth. Now this is completely the wrong translation. It's perfectly wrong. It's appoint a Khalifa on the earth, right? So if you translate it as make, you have this sense that this ayah is talking about the creation of Adam al-Islam. It's not talking about the creation of Adam al-Islam. It's talking about the intisab of Adam al-Islam, meaning Adam al-Islam already exists. And I'm not commenting on evolution or biology or creationism here. I'm saying in this particular ayah, when Allah is saying to the angels that I'm going to appoint a Khalifa on the earth, He's not saying I'm going to create Adam al-Islam. That's not the right translation. That's not the right understanding of the ayat. He's saying I will appoint Adam al-Islam to the mansab of Khalifa fil ard, right? That's what He's saying. Now, let me demonstrate the usage of this verb in other places in the Quran. One from Surah, this was in Surah Al-Baqarah and other places, but I will give another ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah, one from Surah Al-Qaf, and one more from Surah Ash-Shu'ara, the poets, right? So, and the ones from the poets is actually the most important in some ways, but we'll go in order, inshallah. So the second one from Surah Al-Baqarah is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says to Ibrahim al-Islam makes the qurbani, and then after that, as a reward, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after He saves him from actually making it or going through with it, He says to Ibrahim al-Islam, I will appoint you Imamun Nas. It's the same word, Ja'ilun tajalu. It's the exact same verb. In fact, I think it's used in the same tense and form there also, right, as the Adam al-Islam one. And He says to Ibrahim al-Islam, who already exists, has lived a long life already, that now I'm going to appoint you to a new mansab, and that new mansab is Imamun Nas. So there the mansab was Khalifatul fil ard. Here the mansab is Imamun Nas, right? So someone who already exists, is living a life, is being appointed to a new mansab, right? This pattern is very important. The third usage to is a little different. I'm only mentioning it so that you understand the diverse usage of this, the sense of this verb, the way Allah uses it in a broader sense. Here it's almost identical, the usage, the 2 examples so far, but this is kind of different. This is where Zulkarnain, when he's going on his journey, he comes amongst the people who he can barely understand, right? Like we all know the story. So of the 3 events of Zulkarnain, he comes upon a people who he can barely understand. And these are the people who he ends, anyways, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to describe these people, says that we didn't appoint satar for them. We didn't appoint satar for them. So here you see, whenever Allah says we appointed something, it means that there's a sunnah of Allah that is established, right, in regard to that thing. Meaning Ibrahim al-Islam was appointed Imamun Nas, so his zuriyat is Imamun Nas, mabni, right? This is a mabni sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that all the anbiya after Ibrahim al-Islam were from who? They were from the zuriyat of Ibrahim al-Islam. And in the same way, when Adam al-Islam is appointed Khalifatul fil ard, the zuriyat of Adam al-Islam is now the Khalifa fil ard. And actually in the Quran, most people don't know this, Allah often refers to Bani Adam as khulafa, like he refers to, but not just Adam al-Islam, but Bani Adam also. One of the names of An-Nas or Al-Bashar or Bani Adam, one of the other names is khulafa. Allah actually uses khulafa for in the plural to describe the zuriyat of Adam al-Islam. This occurs in the Quran fairly frequently. Okay, so here in this example of Zulqarnain, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he doesn't do something, he didn't make satar, he didn't appoint satar for these people, this is also a mabni sunnat. It means these people will not have shelter because Allah has not appointed it for them. So they will not have shelter from the sun, they will not have satar from the shams ever. Right? They will never have satar from the shams ever. Right? This is the meaning, because Allah has not appointed it for them. You understand? The sunnat of Allah in the negative here is that they will not have satar from that's what the meaning of the ayat is. Okay, so the last one, which is actually the most important, this is in Ashura, and it's right at the beginning. I don't know which ayat it is, but it's regarding the story of Musa al-Islam. So Musa al-Islam is told that he is being appointed to the mansab, or he's talking to Pharaoh actually. There's a part of the surah where Allah is talking to Musa and Harun. Then all of a sudden, what Allah tells Musa and Harun to say to Pharaoh when he's appointing them, all of a sudden Pharaoh is responding to it. So there's this part in the surah right at the beginning where Allah is telling Musa al-Islam and Harun al-Islam to say something to Pharaoh, and then in the next ayah Pharaoh is responding to it, right? And so when Musa al-Islam is actually talking to Pharaoh, he says to them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appointed a jailun tajalu, the same verb, rusul or mursaleen, or one of those, mursaleen I think it was, one of the ones who are sent, one of the people who are sent. So obviously Musa al-Islam at this point in his life has already lived, he's lived in Misr, he's made the hijrah away from Misr, and then Allah is appointing him and Harun, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now appointing someone who's already living or existing to a new mansab. Right, and so we see, going back, so going back to the ayat about Adam al-Islam, we see that ayat, because it used this verb which is used very precisely, and all the derivatives of this root has to do with time, an appointment, like a appointment determined, a time determined. Right, there's a very famous phrase that Allah repeats in the Quran that I'm not remembering right now, but this root has to do with time, and so appointment is the right translation. It's not make or create. So we understand the situation with Adam al-Islam is actually speaking to his appointment. Now another thing to understand here as like a bonus is there's another set of verbs that is very important to understand this event with Adam al-Islam, right? So a few ayat after his appointment to Khalifa, after he does khata, Allah commands him to go down, right? This is a very famous, he commands Adam al-Islam to go down. And so when Adam al-Islam is commanded to go down, what is the verb that Allah uses here? What is the root that he is using? Because there's two verbs in the Quran that are used to say go down, right? There's nazil and there's yuhibtu, right? Allah uses yuhibtu here. Now let's look at nazil for a second, because if Adam al-Islam is being sent from above the seven heavens, some mysterious Jannah in the sky somewhere, or in the seventh heaven beyond the first heaven, you know, if he's being sent down from there, like the Quran is sent down, that is nazil, right? That is nazil. Even if he's coming from the atmosphere, right? Even if the Jannah wasn't beyond in the seventh heaven somewhere, if it was in the atmosphere, when Allah sends down rain, what does he do? The rain is nazil. So whenever something comes from the sky or from the heavens beyond, it is nazil. Right? So what happens is when he sends rain, it's nazil. When he sends comets, hadith from out of space, when he sends comets, that is also nazil. So if he comes from the sky, if Allah sends something from the sky like rain, it is nazil. If he sends it from space like iron or comets, that is nazil. If he sends the Quran from the seventh heaven, from beyond the arsh with Jibreel al-Islam, that is nazil. Right? This is all nazil. But for Adam al-Islam coming down to the earth, when he commands him, go down all of you all together, when he commands him, he doesn't say nazil, he says yuhibtu. And what does yuhibtu mean? Where else is this used in the Quran? It's two places. two places it's used in the Quran. First off, this is a very famous ayah when Allah says that some rocks, your hearts are so hard, some rocks fall down from the khashiyah of Allah, saying that some rocks are softer. You know, with the khashiyah of Allah, when rocks fall down, that is yuhibtu, that is the same root. When rocks like are on a mountain, you have a boulder on a mountain or a rock on a mountain, and it rolls down from the khashiyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is yuhibtu. So coming down a mountain is the sense that this is used in, right? And the second place it's also used, Allah says that to come down into a valley. It's when Musa alayhi salam's qawm, when the qawm of Musa alayhi salam is said to they want other food, they don't want manna wa salwa, right? They want something else. They want garlic and onions and leeks and all this sort of stuff. So Musa alayhi salam says to them, go down into any valley. Go down into any valley and you will find what you're looking for. This is also yuhibtu. So imagine, now let's extend the usage. Now let's come up with an example. You know, Makkah is in a wadi, it's in a valley, right? So every 10 years it floods because it's in a valley in the surrounding plains, right? And when you're at Ghar Hira and you look down, it's in a valley. So you're going down from the surrounding mountains, you go into the valley, right? So if you were to go to Ghar Hira and then climb back down, or like Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would climb back down from there, or if Khadija alayhi salam, who would go back and forth, was after leaving food for Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, climbing back down, that would be yuhibtu. That is the meaning of yuhibtu. Do you understand that? It's so perfectly clear in the Quran that Allah doesn't use nazil. If Jannah was in the sky, it would be nazil. If it was in outer space on a different planet, it would be nazil. If it was above the seventh heavens, it would be nazil. But it was on the earth. That's why Allah says yuhibtu. And the second part of this that you can understand is Allah commands Adam alayhi salam to climb down. So if Allah is commanding Adam alayhi salam to climb down He's not sending him down. He's not picking him up by his kahara and putting him down. He's commanding Adam alayhi salam to do it himself. He's commanding Adam alayhi salam to go down himself. So this is the key of Adamic history. To understand this, what I've just laid out in front of you, this is the key. This is the ibtida of divine history. Now let me just say another note. This is a second bonus round. You can imagine this is a second bonus round that you have to look at evolutionary biology and biological history. And what you understand is that there's two things. First off, there's a mitochondrial Eve, nafsun wahidatun. Allah mentions her in the Quran. It's kind of mysterious. He doesn't detail a lot, but he says he mentions her twice. And nafsun wahidatun, and she's a female. It's clear, the grammar, the morphology is clear, she's a female. Now other mufassirin have tried to, you know, force some interpretation on this, but we know from evolutionary biology that about 250,000 years to 300,000 years ago, there was a common female. She's known as mitochondrial Eve, and all living human beings descend from mitochondrial Eve. Every single living human being on earth descends from mitochondrial Eve, and she had about 6 daughters, and we can trace the mitochondrial lineages, so it's very beautiful in biology. You can trace your father's father, father's father, father's father forever, basically. And you can trace your mother's mother, mother's mother, mother's mother forever, basically. But you can't go like mother's father or father's mother. That's more difficult, right? Because of the Y chromosome, you can go like father to father. And because of the mitochondrial DNA, you can go mother to mother. So it's really well known. It's really well understood. It's not understood how this happened, how all of the Homo sapien evolution could come down to a single woman, and then everyone can progenerate from her. But this did happen. It's understood biologically that this did happen. It's not understood how. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we created you from nafsun wahidatun, all of you all together, and then you were so many dispersed in the land or whatever, when he says this, what he's referring to is our common biological mother. And Allah uses this word, he uses 2 verbs here. When he mentions her twice, he uses a different verb each time. Like once he says khalam qaf, right? And then the other one, I think, is a noon ba ta, right? So he uses 2 creates, and we'll talk about the difference in a second. But when he says created you, Allah often, we created you from tur, right? Or what, I forgot the name. we created you from dust, right? And then or we created you from mud, or we created you from clay. And then he also uses it, we created you from the generations who came before. And then he also says, especially in Nun Ba Ta, he says that we developed you, or we brought you forth from previous generations, right? So that's how Nun Ba Ta is used. But then Kha Lam Qaf, one of the other ways, he says we created you from a clinging clot, right? We created you from a clinging clot. So the creation from dust and the creation from a clinging clot, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using the same verb. He's using the same verb in the Quran. So when he says we created you from mitochondrial Eve, mitochondrial Eve is not Bani Adam. She doesn't have the ruh in her. She's an animal, so to speak. She's a nas, right? She's nas, she's insan, but she's not Bani Adam. Bani Adam has the ruh. Bani Adam has ilm of asmaha kullaha, and has bayan. But before Bani Adam, before the intisab of Adam al-Islam to the mansab of Khalifatul fil Ard, before that you had nas, you had humanity, you had insan, and she is from the animal Homo sapiens. She is of the same biological species as us, but she is prior to the intisab of Adam al-Islam, and perhaps she's prior to when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala metaphysically endowed us with spirit and with speech and with ilm of asmaha kullaha, right? She's before that. Now the other thing to keep in mind is that biologically it is also well understood that Adam al-Islam, that there was a common father, but the common father doesn't occur biologically speaking until 20,000 years ago. 20 to 30,000 years ago, which kind of matches up the Qur'anic and biblical timeline, right? The Adam al-Islam was probably somewhere from, some people say 5,000 years ago, but it was more like 10 to 20 or 20 to 30,000 years ago that Adam al-Islam was on this earth. That's when he was living, right? So it makes sense that Allah mentions nafsatun wahidatun, and the way, if you really do tadabbur, the way Allah mentions nafsun wahidatun, he mentions her. She's obviously important because Allah made her azwaj from her, and he made all of Bani Adam or descendants from her, right? But even though they're descendants from her, she wasn't Bani Adam. She's worth mentioning, but she's not worth giving the tafsil of, because when we come to the point where we recognize, what does this mean? What do you think the people before modernity, before evolutionary biology, when Allah says we created you from a single female nafs, what do you think they thought? Right? How did they interpret it? There's a lot of weird interpretations of this verse, right? That they're not consistent with the exact usage. But we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did create us from nafsatun wahidatun, right? But Allah never speaks about Adam al-Islam this way. He never says we created you from a single male nafs. He doesn't say we created you from a single male father. He doesn't speak of it that way, because Adam al-Islam is not material to create something from. Adam al-Islam has sharf, he has nobility. But to create us like the fetus, Allah creates us from the fetus, right? So the fetus isn't quite fully noble yet. It's not sharf, it's still material, it's still substance that Allah creates us from. In the same way, this Homo sapien female from whom Allah created us all was still material. She was still substance that Allah was using to create us. She didn't have the nobility or the sharf of Bani Adam yet, but she was biologically human. But she had not the istifat process, just like Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the son of he was al-Mustafa, but he was also the son of a Mustafa, and that his father was also the son of a Mustafa, and his father was also a son of a Mustafa, because each person in the lineage of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, Astafa Adam wa Nuh wa ala Ibrahim wa ala Imrana ala ul alameen, right? So in this way, Adam al-Islam was chosen from amongst the existing nas. He was chosen from amongst the existing nas, the way Nuh al-Islam was chosen from amongst the existing nas, and the way Ahl Ibrahim were chosen from amongst the existing nas, and the way Ahl Imran was chosen from amongst the existing nas, right? So once you understand that first ja'ilun taj'alu, then you understand the difference between a nazil and yuhibtu, and then you understand a little bit of the biology that's well understood so far, and you begin to understand the way the Quranic narrative is coherent with the evolutionary biological narrative. And we don't have to accept everything that evolutionary biology says exactly. Some of it may be refined over time, but there are things that are mushahada, there are things that are very well established. And the Quranic narrative, if you look at it with linguistic rigor and you look at it with linguistic precision, is actually affirming a lot of what is being said. Anyways, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.